Everybody hear? Yeah, you can hear me now, right? As soon as Sarah gets back from the bathroom, we're going to start. I'm terrible. Max, you didn't know I was an entertainer, did you? Got to signal you, right? Everybody.
Oh, is this working? All right. Hello and welcome to our Super Tuesday Eve Forum. I am so glad that you are all able to make it out here tonight. We've got a great list of panelists here, distinguished guests, and we've got student representation from many different universities. We've got students here from Rutgers, from CUNY, from Kane, of course. We've got a student here from Abraham Clark High School, from St. Peter's University, LaSalle, and one student is here from Boston University. So why don't we give it a hand for the students who are here. And And now I'm going to turn it over to Senator Lesniak, who is going to kick us off for our event.
Thank you, Sarah. Give Sarah a big hand. She organized this entire event. She does a great job here at the Lesniak Institute. It's so great to have students here from so many different universities to learn about the American democracy, why we are all here, that we have a great diverse panel. This is what America is all about, and that's what the Lesniak Institute is all about. You know, our mission is to train the next generation of American leaders, and the next generation of American leaders, look to your left, look to your right, and some of the older generation, this is what leadership is all about. So I'm really excited. We're going to have a more interesting discussion today about tomorrow's Super Tuesday primary. We have Democrats, Republicans, independents, people on the fence, right, Freeholder? They don't know. They may make their decision tonight. You may endorse tonight, kind of like Buttigieg and Klobuchar. Who knows? But forget about MSNBC, CNN, Fox News. Here's where the action is, and it's going to be all in the hands of InsiderNJ, Max Pizarro.
Thank you, Senator. Appreciate that gracious introduction. And I would only say this as we consider Super Tuesday, and there is in fact a map behind you, looking that way, of the 14 states that are in play tomorrow in this highly significant event where 1,344 delegates are at stake. It's the largest of the primary engagement days in this 2020 season. And I would only offer this by way of introduction as I prepare to introduce the panelists. You can say many things about New Jersey, and I direct my remarks to the students. You can call us corroded in certain degrees. You can say that we're irrelevant to this presidential process because we are having our primary in June. You can say that the candidates that we've run for president, but for one, Woodrow Wilson, have not gone very far. But you can never say that we're boring. And I look around this table, and I think it really is an extraordinary opportunity because I do see people who are involved in this process at every level. People who are activists, people who are elected officials, people who are writers. You're going to hear from some people who are very engaged, and I think it's an extraordinary opportunity. And I am once again going to remind everyone as I introduce the panelists to, again, when you're speaking, please turn on the green light, and then when you're done speaking, turn it off. So the first person I'd like to introduce is Senator Joe Pennacchio, who is the New Jersey co-chair for the Donald Trump campaign.
Thank you, Max, and I want to echo your words when you say there's never nothing that happens in New Jersey that is boring. My remarks for my president are going to be brief. I think he's going to win tomorrow. And I think he's got a good chance, quite frankly, of winning in November because of the economy and because, quite frankly, in my view, at this point, the Democrat Party is fractured. Being a student of history, I see a parallel between what's going on in the Democrat Party now and what happened to the Republican Party back in 1912 with Teddy Roosevelt and Howard Taft. 1912 happened to be the first year that Republicans decided to have primaries. I don't know how many states were in those times, but they only had 11 primaries altogether. Teddy Roosevelt actually handpicked Howard Taft to be his successor. Teddy Roosevelt was a very progressive politician, very progressive president. And Teddy Roosevelt didn't like the way Howard Taft was becoming president. He didn't feel that he was being progressive enough. But in reality, Howard Taft was very progressive. The thing that Teddy Roosevelt hated the most was that he still wasn't president. So Teddy Roosevelt, he ran the primaries. Teddy Roosevelt won 9 primaries. Howard Taft won 2. The rest of the delegates, with all the remaining states, I guess today you would call them the super delegates, they decided to vote for Howard Taft for the presidency. The power of the incumbency is very, very powerful. And whether they're postmaster or elected officials, whoever they were in that position, they owed their job somewhat to the Republican establishment. Needless to say, Teddy Roosevelt was not happy. He bolted. He declared himself as strong as the bull moose. He formed a party with that name, the Bull Moose Party, and the rest is history. Teddy Roosevelt managed to beat Howard Taft in the 1912 presidential election. But Woodrow Wilson, the only president ever that called New Jersey his home, actually won the presidential race in 1912 with about 40% of the vote. So I don't know to what extent the party's going to be that fractured come November. My sense is that Bernie will have enough votes to call it a plurality, but he may not have the actual majority of votes to win it in the convention. Thank you. If he does not, then there's going to be a problem. Unlike 4 years ago when Bernie claims they took it away from him, and he had good reason to think that way. This time I don't think either Bernie or his supporters are going to take it sitting down. They're going to be very, very upset. So a number of things can happen. They can either splinter off and say they'll form their own Bull Moose Party, maybe, maybe not, or a lot of them will just decide to stay home and just, pox on both houses. I'm very upset with the process. I'm just keeping out of it for the rest of the year. Either way, quite frankly, I think that helps President Trump in his election come November. I'm hard-pressed to think about any states that President Trump won in 2016 that he will not be able to carry again. As a matter of fact, I think there are some other additional states that may be in play this time that he lost last time. Minnesota, the rest of Maine, because he did, I think, pick up a delegate last time in Maine, New Hampshire, and maybe Virginia and maybe Nevada. So I think that puts him in a very strong position to win the election in November. For those who, there are the never Bernies and the never Sanders, just like there were the never Trumpers, but there's a major difference in my view. In 2016, Donald Trump co-opted the Republican message to a point that well over 95% of the Republican Party coalesced around him and the message, and they still are coalescing around him and the message. Bernie Sanders doesn't have that luxury right now. He's got a very vocal, strong 1/3 of the party with him, okay? But that means almost 70% of the party, in some shape, way, or form, may disagree with the messenger or the message.
Senator, thank you for your remarks. I think that we can go home now. I think that the room is convinced that Donald Trump should be elected president. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. No, you know what? Thank you, Senator. And there's a people power movement that's sweeping the nation. I think you've heard of it in this primary, and grassroots progressive movement. And we're going to hear now from the gentleman representing that campaign, and it is, of course, the Michael Bloomberg campaign, New Jersey State Director Michael Muller.
Thanks very much, and I think this is going to be one of the more interesting presidential campaigns during this primary season. I kind of laugh. The media, obviously, in 2016 had some struggles getting it right, and there is some similarities. There was some rush to judgments that they had along the way, and I think about it as a political professional when I often look at polling and you see that you're up 48-44. We don't think we have it in the bag, but a lot of pundits have put it in the bag for Hillary last time. And you look at some of those states along the way, it is very volatile. And I look at the polling, this race, the polling has been all over the place on this presidential primary. And so as much as we know is as much as we don't know. And so we're going to learn a lot more tomorrow. But when you think about this race, 4% of the delegates have been decided so far. Tomorrow's the biggest haul, but after tomorrow, 2/3 are still in play. So this is a very, very long primary that we should expect that will play out. And we're seeing today a little bit of the rush to judgment. There are some endorsements coming out that would seemingly try to move to the next phase of the race. And Joe Biden won a resounding win in South Carolina the other night, but it was one win. 50 states, one win. So there's still a long way to go here when you look at the delegates to get to 1991. I think one of the interesting challenges, too, that we look at with this race is that on a lot of levels, there's kind of this push and pull. On when you look at Bernie Sanders and Liz Warren on one side of that spectrum, and the other side, Michael Bloomberg, and Joe Biden. This is going to play out for a while here. I mean, New Jersey is at the back end of the calendar. This is unusual, on a lot of levels that we're talking about, New Jersey from a party line and a little bit of the element of what's going to happen over the next few weeks because I think, and someone correct me if I'm wrong, you probably got to go back to 1980 last time we had to decide party lines during this process. We had an early primary in '08, but in all reality, most time we all were moving in one direction on the Democratic Party side. So Kennedy Carter was probably the last time that there was some real push and pull historically. So this is a really different place, and it's why we're seeing a lot of conversations back and forth where county chairs in the state are trying to decide, should we have an open primary? Will there be lines run by other candidates in the race? So it is a very large moving target. And if you think about it, the roads are kind of converging at an interesting time. Hunterdon County had a party convention, right on the heels of Iowa. We're going to have party conventions this week in Warren, Atlantic, and in Burlington County that will wind up deciding the line right after Super Tuesday. So we're kind of forced with this March 31st deadline in New Jersey to make decisions a lot quicker than, frankly, I think a lot of the leaders probably would like to make right now. So this is going to make this, on some levels, interesting. Some people may call it volatile, but it's definitely going to be a long primary because if you really think about the back end of the calendar, between April 28th, when New York, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Connecticut, large chunk of delegates will be at stake that day, you're then going to wind up having a window within the next 5 weeks. New Jersey will be the biggest haul left on the calendar at that point. It could very well be that we are very determinative of the direction of what happens to head to Milwaukee. And when you think about the timeline, I love telling the story because the recent vote by mail law passed. There's 300,000 Democratic ballots that will be mailed out on April 18th. There's 200,000 unaffiliated, and some of them could participate in the Democratic primary for president out on April 18th, while New York and Pennsylvania will be voting. So you will have the massive air war and the fight going on across the respective rivers right when vote by mail is going on. So this is going to be like a 6-week slog here in New Jersey. It's going to be a long primary if we get to that end of the calendar. So this could be a really, really interesting. It could basically New Hampshire with good springtime weather here in New Jersey.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Muller. And we're next going to hear from the chairman of the Bernie Sanders 2020 New Jersey campaign, Mr. Larry Hamm, who is also a candidate for the United States Senate.
Am I on? All right. Let me say, first of all, that I'm very glad to be here, and I'm very impressed with the facility. It's very nice. Bernie Sanders is the agreed front runner at this time. He won Iowa. He won the popular vote in Iowa. He won the primary in New Hampshire, and he won the caucus in Nevada. He did not win in South Carolina. Vice President Biden had a very significant victory there, but he came in number 2 there, and whereas in 2016 he didn't get any delegates, he did walk away, I believe, with 6 delegates from South Carolina. He is the leader with regards to delegates at this point. Looking at Super Tuesday, the polls show that he will possibly be the winner in California by a double-digit margin, and similarly in Texas. It's not clear what will happen in some of the other southern states, but I'm sure he will walk away from delegates there. I believe that Senator Sanders will be the big winner out of Super Tuesday and will achieve a number of delegates that will make it very difficult for others to catch him. We saw today that, or was it yesterday, that Pete Buttigieg has decided to withdraw from the race, and this morning Amy Klobuchar said she is going to withdraw from the race. Some people might automatically assume that their votes are going to go to Vice President Biden, but that may not be necessarily that clear. While Buttigieg did endorse Vice President Biden, there are polls that show that the majority of his supporters would in fact have Bernie Sanders as their second choice. I don't have any illusions. This has been an uphill fight for Senator Sanders. It is clear that all the political forces were aligned against him. I don't think it was any accident that there were 27 candidates in this primary, more candidates than in any primary in the history of the United States. They threw everything they had at Bernie Sanders, and Bernie Sanders is still on the field and is the front runner, and I think will further consolidate his front runner status after tomorrow, after Super Tuesday. One thing that does disturb me greatly about not only this presidential campaign, but recent presidential campaigns in recent history, and that is the money factor, the way that money is becoming the critical factor. I was raised in school on the democratic principle of one person, one vote. But it seems now that we live in a society where our political process is being determined by the number of dollars that you have. The last presidential election, the candidates spent over $3 billion, more money than in any previous presidential election. This election will probably surpass that. And what distinguishes this election from 2016 is that we have one candidate, former Mayor Bloomberg, who in about 2 months has spent $500 million, which is unprecedented in the history of American politics. You know, I think this is a disservice to the American people. I think that it is warping and twisting our political system, and that we clearly have moved out of the arena of popular democracy to plutocracy. Because shortly, if we continue on this vector, only millionaires and billionaires will be able to run for office and marshal the forces that are needed to win campaigns. I hope that in the future that all of the candidates will in fact do something to minimize the role of money in our elections, because right now it is antithetical to the democratic process.
Thank you, Mr. Hamm. Thank you. So next, we're going to hear from Elizabeth Councilwoman Patricia Perkins-Auguste, who is a Joe Biden supporter.
That's my councilwoman, by the way.
Okay. Good evening, all. And I feel kind of short-sighted because I'm the only woman on the panel on the candidate side. And then there's no other female candidates that are being exposed on this evening. But be that as it may, yes, I am a Joe Biden supporter, and I feel that Super Tuesday is so important in terms of the state of New Jersey, where we sit, in terms of our strategy, in terms of how do we as a state fully participate in the presidential process of picking a president. Being a Democrat my entire life, first realizing and exercising my right to vote during the Carter era, that was in 1980, and then becoming elected with the Clinton era, that was 1992. I understand what it means to be fully engrossed in the process. I understand, and that's why, you know, Joe Biden, you know, we all human, so he made a lot of hiccups in the beginning. But South Carolina proved to us that, you know, there is a period of redemption on the road to victory. And I'm believing that on tomorrow, Super Tuesday, that he will gain more momentum as people began to throw his support behind him. I look at things just a little bit different other than this democracy and Republican versus the Democratic Party. And, of course, the money is just making this such, it's putting us out of reach. And with the whole Bloomberg issue about him coming into the race and buying off people. Okay, let me get back to my candidate. Joe Biden. I believe he understands the people of America. I believe that government is a continuum, and I believe that he will continue some of the work that President Obama set forth that now has been, I guess, all but eradicated with our current president. And I believe he will restore so many things that we need as a nation to move forward. You know, humanity is at stake. And, you know, when humanity is at stake, you know, how do you advance the cause of humanity? Which candidate best will understand that we're all in this together? Me being an African-American woman who, my people were stolen out of Africa, and this is our 400th anniversary of being in America. And America needs to wake up to the fact that, you know, money, not only money is going to destroy us, but this whole humanity issue about race, that too is going to destroy this country from within. So that's why I'm sticking with Joe Biden all the way to the end, and I'm hoping that Super Tuesday brings up it just makes it real. It makes us all participate, whether we're watching on TV, which we all will be doing on tomorrow night, or actually the states that are going to be actually participating. You know, I had family and friends down in South Carolina, and, you know, they walking hand in hand with Joe, and they voted. And, you know, you have a lot of people coming over to candidate Biden for a lot of reasons, because I think at the end of the day, he gets it. It's a true balancing act. The numbers may not look like it's going to be there, but there has always been a lot of underdog when it starts out with these Super Tuesdays until when we get to the finish line. You know, who's going to take that last big breath, where those last delegates are going to come from that is going to push someone like Vice President Biden over. So I'm telling people just to hold tight. It's, you know, to some it may be the worst of times, to others it may be the best of times. To a lot of us, to everybody, it's very interesting times. And yeah, money is, you know, it's the root. The love of money is the root of all evil. And let's hope that America doesn't fall into that trap.
Thank you, Councilwoman. And next we're going to hear from the Executive Director of the New Jersey Democratic State Committee, Saily Avelenda.
Hey, Max, before we go on forward, I just want to mention we tried to contact Elizabeth Warren's campaign multiple times, or the national campaign, and did not get a representative. And I'm sad we do not have that, but we certainly gave her the opportunity.
So I am probably more like all of you on that side than all of them, and I say this because of the background for which my background in coming to this position. Until very recently, I was an activist on the ground, organizing in CD11. I ran an organizing group that helped flip CD11 blue, and retired a 23-year representative. So my experience with politics and with election cycles is very, very different than everyone here. So I just want to say what I tell my kids at the beginning of a football game or at the beginning of baseball season: there is still a lot of baseball to be played. And I say this with kids who, walk in saying, "Oh, the Yankees are always going to win." I have a Met fan at home. There is a lot of baseball to be played. Yes, the polls are interesting. The polls are, in some ways, what we use to guide strategy, But in the end, I remember the polls and I remember the darn New York Times needle on in November 2016 that didn't go the way everyone expected. So there is a lot of uncertainty. There's still a lot of stuff to be played. And why do I say that? New Jersey is really in a position this year to really affect the outcome of this election. If there's a situation where you have two candidates that neither one of them has the required delegate number to win outright, you could become a player with 146 delegates at play. So it really is an important year to think about how New Jersey can affect the outcome of something that in prior years probably felt inevitable by the time it reached us. So it's a really unusual year in that sense. And to some of the other points that were made, I completely 100% agree about the presence of money. As a progressive activist, I can tell you that the idea, the amount of money that is put into elections versus the way in which we listen to the people on the ground and the voters is really disproportionate. And it's something that has negatively affected all of the outcomes that we've seen, and essentially probably in your lifetimes has changed elections from what we all saw back when money was in a different form. It didn't have as much to do with each election. So I think this year is unusual, and all of the patterns that people try to bring in to read into what happens, I don't see it. I think there's something on the ground that's different. I think there's something in the air that's different. I think there's just something different about what's happening in politics, in democratic politics specifically, that's really not just going to change the outcome of this particular convention and election, but the face of the Democratic Party for years to come. And I say this, I know there are questions probably from this panel and from others about, what is the Democratic Party in New Jersey going to do? The answer is we're going to watch what happens tomorrow. That's it. And there's still a lot of baseball to be played.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special announcement tonight. Mr. Tony Teixeira of the Elizabeth Democratic Party, chairman, is going to now tell us that the Union County Democratic Party endorses the following presidential candidate.
Thank you for that opportunity. First, there's a big mistake was made here today. I blame Sarah, because I worked for Senator Lesniak for 5 years, and he never wanted my opinion. So I don't know why I'm here. I'm actually shocked. There's a number of things I want to tell you, Senator, that I've been meaning to tell you over the last number of years, now that I have the floor. But all joking aside, ditto to Saily, I apologize. Ditto. We're here to analyze tomorrow. Tomorrow is about, let's see what happens. I didn't overreact, and I don't think we should as a party after any election, whether it was Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, and South Carolina. I think folks on MSNBC and Fox News and CNN, that's what they get paid to do. It's breaking news. Breaking news, new front runner, breaking news, this is happening, breaking news. They need to do that as whatever we are. I'm not sure why I'm here today as the chairman of the Elizabeth Democratic Party, as a Democrat my entire life, as someone who has been opposed to Senator Lesniak in 1999 with Democrats for Change, and someone who's now, the chairman of that actual party.
And how about as vice chair, as chief of staff for the Union County Democratic chair? Remember that guy?
Actually, I'm chief of staff to State Senator Nick Scutari, who happens to be the Democratic chair for the county Democrats. And it would have been great to have him here today to have his perspective, I'm sure. But I'm excited. I'm excited to see what happens tomorrow. And honestly, I'm excited to see what happens on Wednesday, because when the voters actually go out and cast ballots and and their motivations in South Carolina are different than they are in Nevada, and they're different in Elizabeth, New Jersey than they are in Trenton, you know? And I think it's our responsibility, past these candidates, representatives, as leaders, to just kind of watch and not overreact, and something I learned many years back is time tells everything, and that's what I'm doing. I'm just sitting and waiting. So thank you for the opportunity, and I can't wait for you guys to keep telling us why we should be supporting your candidates.
And next we're going to hear from the great Alan Steinberg, who's a politics writer and radio commentator and the Dean of InsiderNJ.
Well, thank you for the promotion to Dean. I'm very honored by that. I have a different background and a different perspective than everybody here. My background is I was a very active Republican, both in politics and government. I served as senior policy advisor to Chuck Hytaian when he was Speaker of the Assembly. Then I served as the executive director of the New Jersey Meadowlands Commission under Governor Whitman. And then under President Bush, I served as the the regional administrator of Region 2 EPA. And by the way, I worked very closely with Michael Bloomberg in that capacity. And I'll throw this out. I don't think he's going to be nominated, but he was a great mayor. I will submit that. Now, having said that, when Donald Trump came on the scene, I am probably the most anti-Trump person to have entered these portals. I am a confirmed never-Trumper, and I left the Republican Party, and I am now having the status of a center-right independent. My perspective on the election, this is the year of the African-American voter more than anything else. I wrote an article about that at the beginning of the year. 24% of the Democratic vote nationwide is African-American. And it's a very motivated base this year because it is an extremely anti-Donald Trump base because primarily of two issues. One issue is voter suppression, which this administration has absolutely turned a blind eye to. And the other is police brutality. There were consent decrees in effect when Trump came into office to do something about police practices in the city. I'll never forget one of the impressions that is left with me, which is why I think Mayor Bloomberg has had a problem. He's not a racist, but I understand how angry the sentiment is over the stop and frisk. I talk to African-American friends, and they talk about what they call the talk that they have with their children, that they have to be concerned when they go out, what may happen to them when they encounter police. And that really has hit home with me. I don't have to worry about that with my white son or my white granddaughter, but this is something that is very much on the mind of African Americans. And because this is the year where the African American base is so motivated, you have 80%, which has a negative view of Donald Trump, the turnout is going to be far larger than it was for Hillary Clinton in 2016. And I think it's going to result in two things. Number one, it's going to result in the nomination of Joe Biden. Now, the most beloved person, white person I ever saw in the African-American community was Robert Kennedy. I get chills watching the videotape of him addressing the crowd in Indianapolis the night that Martin Luther King was assassinated. That may have been the greatest speech I've ever heard. He stopped a riot, and his assassination was a tragedy for America. Now, Joe Biden is not beloved in the sense that Bobby Kennedy was, but he is trusted more than almost any other prominent white politician in America. And I think that that's going to carry the day. It carried the day for him in South Carolina. He got 61% of the African-American vote. Now, this map was up there. You have to look at these maps and look at the percentage of African-American vote in every state. And I have a prediction for tomorrow. In Virginia, Joe Biden's going to win that primary. 26% of that vote is African-American. That's going to be the key factor for him, even though he hasn't been on television. Because of the African-American vote, he'll meet the 15% threshold both in California and in Texas. That's all he has to do there. Bernie's probably going to win those primaries, but he doesn't have to win there. And it gives him a real shot at winning in North Carolina, where it's even-steven between him and Sanders. But all he has to do in terms of meeting his goals is win Virginia and meet the thresholds in those two states. The big one is coming up in a few weeks. Florida is the most anti-Bernie Sanders state you can find in the country for two reasons. Number one, the Jewish constituency in Florida, don't live in Florida, but I'm very active in the Jewish community, is very anti-Bernie Sanders because of his position on Israel. He is going to get overwhelmed with the Jewish vote in Florida. And the other constituency is the Cuban constituency. It votes more in Republican primaries, but there's enough in the Democrat primary to make a difference. That primary is really between Biden and Bloomberg. If Biden wins there, he's off to the races. If Bloomberg wins there, he's still a factor, but if he doesn't win there, I think that he may have to get out. After that, you have what I call the Northeast Triangle, consisting of New York. If Bloomberg is out, Biden wins that primary, again, because of several constituencies. Number one, African-American vote, and number two, the Jewish vote. Pennsylvania, Biden's home state. He wins there. And the third is New Jersey. This year, New Jersey is going to make a difference, and Phil Murphy's in the position of being a kingmaker. And I think that I doubt he would endorse Bloomberg because of all the issues with Bloomberg and the women in his workplace and the NDAs. Given all the controversy we've had here, I think Phil Murphy would be asking for trouble if he endorsed Bloomberg. I think he will endorse Biden, and I think that Biden will win all three. Neither him nor Sanders will have enough delegates to come into the convention and win on the first ballot, but I think that on the second ballot, the superdelegates will give the nomination to Biden. And I think the state to which Republicans pray that the Democrats are so fragmented, the Democrats are always fighting. In 1948, you had a Democrat walkout in the convention because of the civil rights issue. You had the Dixiecrat walkout, and Harry Truman was holding that paper that says, Dewey defeats Truman, when it was all over. In 1932, Democrats were fighting like mad. FDR won it on the fourth ballot. The idea that a brokered convention is bad is nonsense. A brokered convention can be a very good thing because usually if one candidate wins a convention, he is a plurality candidate. He's not a majority candidate. Usually the brokered conventions achieved a majority consensus behind a candidate. So I think a brokered convention may be a healthy thing for the Democrats. But again, I think on Election Day it's going to be the African-American vote. It'll win the three states that Hillary lost, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. And I think there's a whole lot of other states, including Ohio, that the African-American vote will bring home for Joe Biden.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. And the last panelist we're going to hear from before we open it up to a discussion is someone that is sometimes referred to as the last literate newspaper man in New Jersey. The columnist from the Star-Ledger, Mr. Paul Mulshine.
Thanks. I wrote for Tomorrow about, I found a lawyer down in Florida who is representing two Democrats who are suing to get Bernie off the ballot because he's not a Democrat, which is pretty funny, but he's not. He's really an independent. He's an independent in his Senate listing. He's an independent in his 2024 fundraising, which he's already raised a couple $1 million. So the odd thing is, as a Republican conservative, I kind of flip that around. I'm like, geez, did we Republicans ever nominate someone who's not a Republican? And the answer is, it just wouldn't happen. The Republicans would just cut it off at the pass. And there was a lot of ways that they could have done this. They could have said, as they said, in this lawsuit, in some detail, how he doesn't meet, it's a closed Democratic primary, as ours is. You got to be a Democrat to vote in it, and then the logic says you got to be a Democrat to run in it. He's not a Democrat. In fact, I strongly suspect there was a movie in the 60s. Remember the Manchurian Candidate? Guy goes to Russia, comes back, his brain has been replaced, and he wants to do all. It's as if he went to Russia and they created a guy who would destroy the Democratic Party. And he's really doing it. I mean, I saw him in 2016. His people were all outside the convention. They were a lot more fun to hang out with than the Hillary people. And they had a lot to say. I mean, they supported Jill Stein, and I saw her proclaim Hillary was the biggest warmonger of them all, which is true. But those people were not gonna. It didn't help the Democrats at all that they had that crowd out in the lot dissenting. Now this time you're going to come upon the same phenomenon. The Democrats should have said early on, if I ran the DNC or whatever, I would have said to all the state chairs, you got to tell this guy he's either got to become a Democrat or he ain't on a single ballot. And do it. You can do it. Parties have the right to do that kind of thing. Now it's too late, obviously. But if I were the DNC people, I would say, listen, just have a big event like the day after Super Tuesday and just say, listen, this is going to be a majority vote. The FDR nomination, that Alan mentioned went 4 votes. That was back then, you had to get a 2/3 majority. They didn't change the rules so FDR could get nominated with 60%. They kept the rules and they went overnight through all these ballots. Well, if the Democrats should all be proclaiming, listen, we don't know who's going to win the majority or if anyone's going to win the majority, but we are not changing that rule, period. And then just let Bernie's people know that now. You got your challenge. Can you get a majority? Yes. If not, don't complain when it goes to the second ballot. So, you know, that would, as for the rest of his record, you know, a lot of this stuff is really deadly to the Democrats. Medicare for all, when you talk to senior citizens, they all see that as a weakening of Medicare for them. That's a very big issue with them. And there are numerous other issues where he's just alienating, like Florida, like Alan said. The seniors in Florida are going to kill him. And then he ticked off the Cubans in Florida for no reason. It was really didn't need to tick the Cubans off, you know. So it's just a funny thing as a Republican to sit back and watch this guy who's not a Democrat just absolutely control the Democratic nominating process. And I don't think that's got the attention it deserves, but possibly after tomorrow it will.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mulshine. So, listen, there's so much on the table, and I want to just ask a particular question, and then I really want to open it up for discussion. And what I would encourage people to do is simply raise your hand, and then I'll identify you, and we'll do it that way, because I want to get people who haven't yet spoken into the conversation. I also want to give people a chance to respond to a lot of the sharp-elbowed things that have already been said. And in that vein, I would offer these questions to start this discussion. To Mr. Muller, who represents the Bloomberg campaign, Mike, is there simply too much humanity with Biden? That's something I want you to answer. Is 17% of the black vote, Mr. Hamm, in South Carolina, recorded by Bernie Sanders over the weekend, simply not going to get it done if, in fact, we're listening to Mr. Steinberg, who's saying that this is, in fact, an election where the black vote is going to be critical. And Senator Pennacchio, you opened this discussion by saying that the Democratic Party is irreparably fractured. And are we not seeing that in evidence here with two very pointed and divergent paths? And to the point that Ms. Avelenda made when she said that there's something happening here, to quote an old song, I direct that idea to the students. Do you feel that there is, in fact, something in the atmosphere in this election year? Do you believe that this is an election year that will defy the conventional wisdom that we see in the polling? And again, just to bring this back to the main point that Senator Pennacchio made at the outset, is this a party that is simply too fractured? And I will start with Mr. Muller and go to Senator Pennacchio and Mr. Hamm, and then to the students. And then, as I said, if you would like to weigh in, please just get my attention, and I'll call you as soon as there's an opening.
Thanks, Max. And I'll start off like one of the questions. You know, we're talking a lot about the black vote and the importance for Joe Biden. Exit polls out of South Carolina had nearly half of the voters who decided because of Clyburn's endorsement. So that is a different, unique factor in South Carolina that may not be a factor in every one of the states moving forward. He clearly has a lot of capital in the black community, and that is definitely a part of, I think, what's going to wind up moving forward. I also think that when we look at this, and we're going to learn a lot more tomorrow, I found the conversation here interesting, and I had to go dovetail back to the money. And I would look. I've been doing Democratic politics for 27 years. I can think about how many times I have fought through, underfunded. This is not a new issue. The issues of campaign finance reform are real. But what's interesting and ironic is that it's usually from a person's self-interested perspective too. Mike Bloomberg invested in taking on the NRA. We won some major victories there. Took on Dirty Coal. Won some major victories there. Then spent significant resources to help flip the House. Those are all good things, but when you're a candidate doing it, it gets muddied up because all of a sudden now people have little bit of their own perspective that they're bringing to the table. And one of the numbers brought up earlier was the $3 billion spent last time. And look, this is not the rationale of the candidacy, but it is an intangible. And we're going to feel it here in New Jersey. 14 electoral votes are going to go to the Democratic candidate in New Jersey no matter what. And frankly, this 50-state strategy that we're embarking on is going to make sure that folks like Josh Gottheimer and Mikey Sherrill and Tom Malinowski and Andy Kim are all going to be in a position where someone's not going to be picking the pocket of every big donor in a state that usually is an export state. And so on a lot of levels, it is an interesting time. But I also find that the monetary conversation, I've been probably as frustrated as anybody over the years because I've been on the other side of fighting those, probably less in New Jersey, but a lot more for the 12 to 13 years before I got here. And I can say this, the truth of the matter is, it's convenient when money gets blamed, and it usually is blamed when a candidate's on the ballot. But if someone's spending on behalf of what you like, you usually have a different perspective and wind up thinking it's a good thing.
Thank you, Senator Pennacchio.
Thank you, Max. I wouldn't take exception, but I got exception to what you said, that I said that the Democrat Party was irrecoverably fractured. I didn't say it because I can't even pronounce the word. But the point is that it may be fractured to a point where you can't fix it. And there's a history replete that shows us that when parties go into elections that they are fractured, that they lose. In 1860, Abraham Lincoln won because the Democrat Party was totally fractured. In 1912, we spoke about Teddy Roosevelt. And then look no further than Ross Perot and what he did to George Bush I in 1992 when he took enough votes that with 40-odd%, low 40% of the votes, William Jefferson Clinton became president. You take that party that we have right now that's they're fighting, and they may come and they may make peace, but in the meantime, they're spending a lot of time and effort and money against themselves, which will come back to haunt them come November. And you're looking at a president that when he was elected back in 2016, the Real Clear average politics had him at an approval rate of 37.5%. Last week, the Real Clear politics approval rating for the president was at 52%. That plus you take the fact that we mentioned that 95% of Republicans are coalescing around their candidate. He's got a majority of independent votes. The Democrat Party has an uphill battle, I think, in this election.
Mr. Hamm, I'm listening to the panelists. They're talking about Bernie Sanders having an African-American voter problem, a Florida problem, a Medicare for all problem, and you say?
Believe it or not, there are some aspects of Senator Pennaccio's analysis that I agree with, even though we're certainly in opposite camps. But let me say this. It's no secret that Senator Sanders, who was not very well known outside of Vermont, did have a difficult time, a somewhat difficult time with African Americans in 2016. But today, in 2020, he has the strongest multiracial, multi-generational campaign of all the campaigns, because our society is not just comprised of black people and white people. There are also Latino people. There are also Asian American people. There are also Native American people. We live in a very racially and ethnically diverse country. Unfortunately, racism and discrimination and racial violence are still problems, and racial inequality are still problems that plague people. But in terms of the campaign, when we look at the polling numbers and the exit polling, we see that Senator Sanders does well across the board. Now, he didn't do as well. You mentioned the 17% in South Carolina. I believe he actually got 31% of the younger voters. He does well nationally. Yes, he does well nationally according to the polls with African Americans. You know, Joe Biden had a great victory in South Carolina, full stop. But one win doesn't make a streak. And so there's a lot that remains to be seen with regards to tomorrow, the Super Tuesday contest. and also the other states, as has been pointed out by the other representatives here, the other states that come after Super Tuesday. But I will say this. We should not make light of a brokered convention. Remember, there was a somewhat brokered convention when Hubert Humphrey ran in 1968, and we lost to Richard Nixon. And look what a terrible thing that was, the aftermath of the Nixon presidency. I don't think a brokered convention will bode well for the party, but I'm Senator Sanders' representative, so I have to say what he says. And he says, as he said, because I was a delegate for Bernie Sanders in 2016, I literally sat several rows away from him in the convention center. I was there when Senator Sanders gave his concession speech to Hillary Clinton. He said publicly he would support Hillary Clinton. In the aftermath, I don't know where this narrative comes from that he didn't support Hillary. Sanders gave 54 speeches as a surrogate for Hillary Clinton. And he has said again and again in 2020 that he will support whoever the Democratic Party nominee is, that he sees as the number one task the defeat of Donald Trump, the worst president in our lifetime, on which I totally agree. However, a candidate is not a magician. They cannot guarantee what their voters will do, what their supporters will do. There was one study that showed, however, that more Sanders supporters supported Hillary Clinton than Hillary Clinton supporters supported Barack Obama. And I think that's something to consider. So, you know, people should think very carefully about what's going to happen in Milwaukee and how we're going to handle it. Quite frankly, I think that Senator Sanders is the candidate that will take this country to victory. I think he is the one that brings the excitement to the young people. I don't think we can win this without the young people. He brings the excitement, you know, he brings the agenda for change. Quite frankly, I respect Vice President Biden, but I quite frankly don't think he can defeat Donald Trump. I don't believe it.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to offer the floor to the students. Is there a question? Yes, ma'am. Could you please identify yourself?
Hello, my name is Siobhan Williams. I'm an undergrad at Kane University. Firstly, I would like to thank all of you for being here. I've really loved everything that has been said. As for a student, I agree a lot with Chairman Hamm. I agree that young people want something new. I run an organization, and we've been focusing on voting engagement and who wants to vote. And a lot of people are tired of seeing the same people running again and giving the same exact sources of the same post-democratic candidate. They want to see new change and things that really rectify with them, specifically people of color. So I would love if Councilman Perkins and for Chairman Hamm to really go more into depth with that and to talk more about what they think the Democrats could do for young voters and what young voters need to be looking at.
Probably Saily can probably jump into this conversation representing the state Democratic Party. But however, you say some things about seeing something new. I just want you to just call to your attention, all the presidential candidates are over 70. I think Elizabeth Warren may be 70 or 71. So I'm just trying to put it in the proper framework in terms of your mind. The current candidates that are now up for Democratic nomination, including Senator Sanders, they're 77, 76, 72. Not saying that's a bad age, but just trying to say, because there may be people present in the room, and not to be disrespectful at any sort.
I resemble that remark,
I said
Councilwoman.
that. But what I'm just trying to say to the young people, the change really begins from the ground up. It swells up. And so those who are seeking elective office need to see our young people swell up and say they want change and they want to be a part of the process. I got engaged when I was about 29 years old. That's when I was first elected. But there have been many others throughout, people that I know who got engaged earlier on, to say, hey, this is our country too, and we want to see what the future is going to look like and be a part of the architect for our own future, for our own humanity. So as young people, yes, please get involved. And I can see Vice President Biden really concerned about the young people in terms of, going across the country in areas where African Americans reside and where we thrive. He's going to get that support because, trust is something you can't buy. You can't buy a person's trust. They have to see it. They have to feel it in their hearts. They have to see it in your eyes when you talk about it, when you talk about what you plan to do for the country. And I think I get that with him. Yeah, I mean, some stuff come out that we say he should not be saying, but at the end of the day, we can trust what he says, that he cares about us and care about you. I have two sons, one 19, one is 21. So this is there right now, and I make them get engaged. The 21-year-old, he's on the autism spectrum, and he's a committee man in our district. Okay, so that's about getting them engaged. Voice your own advocacy. Be your own advocate. Come out and be engaged. Get involved in this political process. Like I said, to some, this may be the worst of times. To others, this is the best of times. But to all of us, it's very interesting. I was on the college campus up at Boston University, and I looked, me and my roommates from all across America. Someone was from Tennessee, Kalamazoo, Tennessee. Another roommate was from Nashville, Tennessee. Another roommate was from Westport here, New Jersey. Someone else was from Jersey City. And we all sat and we watched President Carter lose that election. And we all started crying. I can't believe President Carter lost. We love President Carter. But you have to get engaged. You have to engage the young people. And I'm glad that you're here. And there's a lot. Our people of African descent, we've been here 400 years. And so the histories of Willie Lynch and those other governmental issues that were set up to hold us back as a people, we have to say no, never again, no more. So we have to engage ourselves. We have to put ourselves out there. And I think we'll have a friend with Joe Biden when it comes to those issues. And so that's why I'm supporting him. Thank you.
Can I just jump in here?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
So I'm going to give you the perspective. I hope I don't get fired, but the activist perspective, the Saily activist perspective. What I told people when we were organizing at NJ 11th for Change is, if they don't hear from you, they're not hearing from you. Okay? Everybody who has an elected position has to be hearing from you, not just as a constituent and a person who is wants to participate in the process, but they also want to they need to see your face, they need to know you're present, they need to know you're there. The other thing I would say is there are many ways to affect an institution, because the Democratic Party and the political process, these are institutions that are well-oiled to some extent, less well-oiled, depends on where you are on this, depends on where you are. But it's hard, right, for an outsider to stand there and look at this huge institution and say, how do we get in there? But there are ways to get involved, as the Councilwoman said, through your own committees, through outside pressure groups, as we did in NJ 11th for Change. Ultimately, the biggest thing that I see is the internet activism versus actual participatory activism, right? I'm going to tell you a secret, and you may not know this. No argument was ever won on Facebook, and no one has ever been convinced of anything by a Facebook post. I tried it. It doesn't work. Literally the only thing that can happen, the only way to get involved is show up at your local municipal committee, find out who your electeds are, call their office a lot, become familiar with what they're doing, call them when it's good and call them when it's bad. Get involved in you're an organizer, so you have a group, develop the influence, figure out how to build from the grassroots up, because for me, that's my mentality, and not look at it as a top down and how do I get in the door. That's my speech, and I'm probably gonna get fired.
Yes, Mr. Steinberg.
I just want to.
Alan, pardon me, I
address-
just want to recognize that we have another elected official in the room. My eyes are not so good, but I think I'm looking at Assemblywoman Carol Murphy, correct? Hello, Assemblywoman. I'd love to hear from you in a moment. Alan, pardon me.
I'll make this brief. I think you raise an excellent point on the need to outreach to the young, particularly in the African-American population. I'll make a wild prediction. I think if Biden is nominated for president, his vice presidential nominee will be Stacey Abrams, because she's absolutely the best suited to outreach to the young African-American vote. She's a brilliant person, superb communicator, and watch for that.
Take that.
I just want to, because you had said Councilwoman Perkins and Larry Hamm, so let me respond also. The polls are clear that the candidate that has the most young people support is Senator Sanders, and that's for a reason. Why does this nearly 80-year-old man have the most youth support? Why does he have rallies that bring out 10,000, 25,000 people? I was at the rally in Brooklyn, 25,000 people, and all of them, I think, were like under 40, under 35, and younger, because of his policies. This election is about policies. It's really not about personalities. And I know some people will disagree with me about this. It's really not about identity. It is about policy and how policies affect the lives of everyday people. People are suffering in this country. The only people for whom this economy is working is the people at the top, the 1%, the wealthiest people in this country. It's really not working. The middle class is losing ground. They're slipping into the working class. The working class is being impoverished, and the poor are falling through the safety net. The only people this economy is working for, the people this guy over here represents, Michael Stop and Frisk Bloomberg, or this one right here, who represents a billionaire in the White House. People want change. People want change. Young people like Sanders because he's saying cancel the student debt. That's why young people like Sanders. Young people like Sanders because he's saying college should be the way it used to be in California and the way it used to be in New York City. It should be free. Young people are the majority of minimum wage workers. They are gravitating towards Senator Sanders because he's saying double the minimum wage. And that's really what's going on in the Democratic Party. It is a fight between people who want to return to the status quo, because clearly Donald Trump is outside of the status quo. Just the other day, Donald Trump ended a student loan forgiveness program that the Obama administration had put into place. You know, some people want to go back to the way things were, but other people, the wing of the party represented by Sanders and Warren, they want a different future. They want an America that works for everybody, not just the wealthiest people and the richest people. I mean, it's obscene to me that the 9th richest person in the world, there are 9 billion people on the planet Earth, the 9th richest person would oppose a piddling doubling of the minimum wage. You know, it's obscene what's going on. And we can sit around here and make believe things are normal, but there's a tectonic shift going on in the Democratic Party, whether or not Senator Sanders wins. we have one of the highest rates of foreclosure in the country, right here in New Jersey. People are being put into the streets. We have homeless veterans sleeping at Penn Station in Newark. So that's why I think Senator Sanders is attracting so many young people.
Thank you, Mr. Hamm. Look, I'd like to give the Bloomberg and the Trump campaigns a chance to respond, but I would also like to identify, and she needs no introduction, she's Union County's own freeholder, Angela Garrettson, and I want to give her a chance to get in on this discussion momentarily. I will call on you, freeholder. I just want to give the Trump people a chance to respond, and then Bloomberg, and then we'll get to Ms. Garrettson.
I guess that's me. Larry, just when I was getting to like you, too. We see two different economies. We do. And I sort of respect you for seeing it one way, but I would hope that you would respect myself and others for seeing another way, and hopefully respect the facts. A rising tide does lift all ships. That's been criticized as trickle-down economics. But it was John F. Kennedy who said that. And if you take a look and you measure our economy by any standards, compared to when President Trump took office to now, you can see that only good things have happened. The GDP under President Obama never touched over 2%. Never touched 3%. It averaged 1.88%, I believe. Historically, no president in the history of our country ever had 8 years of service where the gross domestic product never went anywhere near 3%. He said that you needed a magic wand to bring back those manufacturing jobs. Well, the magic wand arrived, and President Trump waved it, and we have 400,000 manufacturing jobs as part of his America First initiative. Historical unemployment rates across the board. Minorities, Hispanics, African Americans. We have median income, which is the lowest, for the lowest portion of our working class people. They're the ones that are benefiting the most. Median income under Obama over 8 years increased only $900 over 8 years. Under President Trump, for the first 3 years, the median income has actually risen $5,000. That's money in the hands of the pockets of people that Larry Hamm is complaining about. Most of the jobs that President Obama created were part-time jobs. Most of the jobs that President Trump has created are full-time jobs. There are actually more job openings now, as we speak, than there are people to fill those jobs. And there's going to be more. The participation rate, the reason we have even a 3.6 or 3.7 unemployment rate is because the participation rate went from only a 62 and change to almost 67%. That means a lot more people feel good about the economy. A lot more people can jump into the economy thinking they can earn money, and now they're part of that economy. That's the participation rate gone up that percentage point. President Trump admitted the other day he never thought. He thought he could get 2 or 3 million jobs created. He's gotten over 7 million jobs created. So by anybody's standard, I think that this president has been successful with the economy. If you promise people, young people, free stuff, okay, albeit well-intentioned, because they struggle. I struggled, okay? I struggled to a point where I managed to get myself a degree in dentistry, so I was a practicing dentist. But I came from a very, very humble means. Myself and 3 brothers in one bedroom, $70 a week I'd earned for $1 an hour, so do the math. Yes, you can work 70 hours a week. Should I work that hard? I had no choice. Whatever I wanted, I had to earn because I couldn't depend on my parents to give me anything extra. The point is that we have no glass ceilings in this country. So you can go as far and as high as your talents will allow you to take you. The laws tell you that you can do that. Our Constitution guarantees that you can do that. Our Declaration of Independence gives us the right to be and to search for happiness. That means you can get paid more than what you're getting paid now.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. And Mr. Muller, could you respond? A lot of people are jumping on Bloomberg, just having too much money. Mr. Hamm earlier said he's put $500 million into this campaign. It seems obscene for regular people, and you say?
Yeah, I have a few comments. I'll also go back to something in a second after that, but I'll start with it. The $15 minimum wage shot, Mike Bloomberg supports a $15 minimum wage. And you can't have your facts to yourself on this, because when we were at a forum the other day, we talked about the fact that Bernie Sanders voted 5 times against background checks. So ultimately, it may have been your former position, but you own that one too. So moving right along, when it comes down to it, we look at the economy and we start, looking at this. First off, I'd like to have some respect for the voters. They're not idiots. This idea of buying the election, look, they're seeing a lot of ads. And you know what? They have to make up their mind. And I don't think they're idiots. And the American people aren't idiots. So I will talk about the economy for a little bit. We suffered here in New Jersey with a slow to bounce back economy during the financial collapse. While in New York City, as mayor, we saw 327% of the jobs retained. By the end of his term, that was $500 million in new jobs. He's a job creator. And this war on job creators, and again, Larry, really cute, talking about this war on millionaires. It's the majority of the United States Senate. Like, let's face it, there's a millionaires club there. That's a real problem, but again, can't have just part of the facts. And we are in a state that we've had 2 self-funding, very affluent governors on our side of the aisle. So I also think that we also have to know we're throwing rocks in our glass house. But the last part I want to say, we're going to win back this race in the fall by winning back the heartland. At the end of the day, we lost economically sensitive voters at the end of the 2016 election. And frankly, Mike Bloomberg is a successful job creator. He is going to be in a position to make a case that he has a vision for America to actually create jobs. Look, he has a wealth tax that he is going after the same people Larry is talking about we need to go after. There's not a lot of differences here. But the truth of the matter is, Mike Bloomberg could win back that voter in Wisconsin that we did not get last time. He could win back that voter in North Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Muller. Thank you. So, Freeholder Garrettson, we're hearing a lot from 2 representatives of candidates who aren't even Democrats. We hear this all the time, right? Or Bloomberg was a Republican. Bernie Sanders is an independent. You're a Democrat, longtime former mayor. Can you heal this party?
I think the important conversation that's happening is that when we think about the Democratic Party, many of the people who are elected today started as grassroots individuals. It was not just individuals who were always a part of the system. I'm proof positive of that. So when you think about AOC, she came into a system that was broken, right? But she's one of the most active, most articulate speakers that many young people identify with, but a lot of people in the establishment think they don't agree with it. It's not about whether we agree or disagree, but it's that she had an opportunity to get into that party, our party. So when I think about Bloomberg, or you think about what Bernie is saying, it's not policies or identity, it's both. And I think in the Democratic Party, when you have representatives and you hear about all of the work that we've had to do, you don't just start and say, well, we want something new. Something new is going to be because you understand that you are one of the most important voting blocks as a young person. Young people can change and make a difference, but not if you just say, oh, this is new. You have to understand, will that person get there and be able to make a difference on day one, or are they going to sit there and be stagnant? And that's the concern that's happening with a lot of the candidates that we're hearing from today.
Listen, yes, ma'am. Please identify yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Natalie Hernandez. I'm an undergrad here at Kean University. I'm a global studies major with a minor in political science. And when I hear all of you speak, the first thing comes to mind is what gets us interested and out to vote. And I'm sorry, Joe Pennacchio, you mentioned the economy. That's such a big thing for us to worry about. But what's mostly very attractive to us is basic human rights. And Councilwoman Perkins, you said basic human rights, you said our humanity's at stake. Well, yes, it is at stake. And what really makes us interested in being part of this conversation is basic human rights, such as healthcare, such as education. And like you mentioned, it's not just policy or identity, it's both. I agree. I think we have to really pay attention to policies because that's exactly what's getting people like us out to vote and interested. The fact that Senator Sanders was able to make millions of young people interested in the conversation, making them feel like they're included and supported in this fight is what gets us all out to vote. And so I think as a young person who's really interested in politics, I think there's so many different elements at stake that gets young voters out to vote.
Is there a student who is not supporting Bernie Sanders? Or if you support Sanders, can you back up what she just said?
I don't think that that's necessarily the significance. I don't know if I necessarily support one candidate more than the other. I really enjoyed what you said. I think that it's more so how are we keeping them engaged? There's a lot of young people that are falling in love with Bernie Sanders and his policies, and let's say that Bernie Sanders doesn't make it. How are we going to make sure that they're going to come and they're still going to be politically active in time for when it's time for New Jersey to be involved with the primaries? I understand that you're telling me and other people that we need to be engaged and go to all these things, but people aren't educated on that. So how are they coming to us as young people? Bernie Sanders was able to do it somehow, and I just want to know how are the other Democratic candidates going to keep that going if Bernie Sanders decides to drop out or he doesn't make it.
Thank you. I'd like to hear from everyone up here again, but I just want to hear from this young gentleman right here first. Sir, please introduce yourself.
Hello, my name's Hector Meneses, and I graduated from Boston University. And kind of supporting what she said over there. I'm sorry, what's your name? Natalie, sorry. And that I think when we're, as someone who supports Bernie Sanders, I agree with her in terms of the policy that Bernie Sanders has the best policy for our younger generation, that we as individuals need to accept the fact that there's a baseline need that every human or every person here who's living in America should have, such as Medicare for all, being able to have a well-living life, thinking about the working families. But another part of the conversation I also like to bring up is the overarching idea or chastising of the younger voters. I think they are participating in this election, but they're doing it through different means, through different tools that we may not understand. And a part of that tool is social media. And yes, although maybe debates in your eyes aren't engaging or aren't occurring through Facebook, but how I look at it, I think it is. I think through the use of memes. And yes, there's a lot of contention behind that idea, but I think one thing that we have to keep in mind is that the way in which we communicate is much faster and much more quickly than it has been in the past. And so a more effective way in being able to communicate with each other is through memes with a funny caption. But what that represents is this ongoing conversation that we are having with each other. And so I think being able to take the opportunity to listen to exactly what we're asking for. And I think for all of us here, at least in my opinion, in my generation, which is we want to go and have a higher education for free and not have to worry about the stresses that come behind whether or not we're going to be able to pay for it and how do we pay for it, right? I am thankful that coming out of Boston University, I had a very lucrative job and I managed to pay off my entire debt in 6 months. But I can tell you for a fact that I know. But I can tell you for a fact that literally half the people in Elizabeth won't ever have the opportunity, and I can tell you for a fact that I may be the one unique person who lives in Elizabeth who had that experience. And I'm very thankful for that experience, but no one should ever have to have that or should ever need to necessarily worry about that. I think when it comes to Medicare for all, with the idea that people have to worry, I think none of us as individuals should ever have to worry about who's going to be able to pay, whether or not we would be able to pay for Medicare expense. And I can speak to that experience as someone whose mother who went into a truck accident and we went under debt during the 2008 recession, right? And so these are things and these are experiences that have touched us and quite frankly, all of us here, because we did go through 2008 recession and we saw this impact that it has upon our parents and the faults that capitalism has on our system. And the only solution to that is through democratic socialism.
Thank you, sir. So I want to go to Ms. Avelenda and I want to come across here. Go ahead, ma'am.
I wanted to address first the point about social media. I was not in any way trashing social media. It's a very useful tool. My point really was to address in terms of getting involved in a way that affects the system. The most effective ways are really about participating in it and being a more, not so much a commentator, but actually participating in that process. So I don't disagree that social media plays an important role in what we all do and how we use it and how information is communicated. But I think the truth about how we affect the system, these institutions that feel forbidding to some people is really, you have to get in there, right? You have to find a way to get into the system and then try to figure out how to change it. The other thing I want to say is, I wrote an op-ed, I co-wrote an op-ed before I had this job, that right after the 2019 election, that spoke about what I was seeing on the ground as an organizer, spoke to the need for candidates to speak to and for the people in their districts, right? The feeling that candidates were disconnected from the people they were supposed to represent is a real feeling that we all, Democrat and Republican, I think all parties have. We have to find a better way to compress that feeling. Right? We don't want that. We want our people who are, especially young voters, but not just them. I'm Latina. I'm Cuban. It's very different. My family is Republican. It's Democrat. It's like very conflicting. Thanksgivings are very crazy. So you have to speak to the people where they are, right? We can't just be like, here's your candidate. It has to really, there has to be buy-in, and you have to feel invested, right, in the election, or you're not going to feel, to your point, the policy isn't driving you out. We need to get the candidates out that and this is not a comment on any candidates. I'm just giving you sort of the feeling that we had on the ground, that there is a disconnect. So I'm not in any way bashing any candidate. It's just the sense out there, and and how we address that, I think, is really important. And it could be through discussions about policies. It really, to your point, is policies plus identity. I do think there's something to be said for that. Ethnic groups are not a monolith. They're just not. They come to the table with very different life experiences. And you can't just say the Hispanic vote when I personally know it doesn't all fit correctly. You can't say the black vote because I can see that it doesn't all fit. We have to be really, really careful about making those generalizations. And as organizers, as an organizer when I was there, I could see that happening. And now I'm on the other side of the table, and I'm trying to remember that, to keep that in mind and trying to bring that type of discussion to the system, which I'm now apparently am a part of in this unique new way. So it's an interesting place for me to have come up from. That's why I started out by saying I'm probably more aligned with what you guys are doing than what they were doing, because of how I came up to this position.
Thank you. Mr. Steinberg?
I'm going to have a controversial person here tonight, and all of you are going to be very incensed by what I say, but I'm going to tell you why Medicare for All doesn't work. I get Medicare. I'm 70 years old. I paid into it for years, okay? The reason Medicare works for me is that the American hospitals agreed to lower their rates for senior citizens. I get a statement every month. I said, how do my doctors make any money? The rates they are getting paid from Medicare are so low, they would be hurting financially, the doctors of this country, if they had to lower those rates for everybody. So the way Medicare works, there's a recognition that senior citizens like me are not as healthy as younger people. Special allowance has to be made for senior citizens, and the hospitals agreed to do that. Doesn't sound very palatable to you. I feel the best way of providing for health care for the younger generations is a tribute to President Obama. Obamacare is the way to go. Add in a public option. But Medicare for All is never going to work. It would only work if you bankrupted the hospitals throughout America, or else if you raise taxes to such an extent that you young people trying to work yourself up, trying to start a family, trying to save for a house, would be impoverished for years. So there's no such thing as a free lunch. I know it doesn't sound very good when I say that, but that's an unpleasant reality.
Thank you, sir. And Councilwoman?
Thank you. I like that there's no such thing as a free lunch. When I went to Rutgers University, Professor Kimball, my marketing professor, used to always say that there's no such thing as a free lunch. Someone has to pay. With that in mind, young people, you have to be engaged. You have to go out and vote. If you knew the history of what it costs people of color, African Americans, to get the right to vote, bloodied, beaten, hung in America, died. You got to know the history of America and the right to vote. Anybody that looks like me should not even, you need to go and vote. It's not a given. People fought. There were laws against us to go and vote. There were laws against us to do everything here in this country. So now you're standing on the shoulders of so many heroes and sheroes, unnamed, hanging from trees, castrated, for the right to vote. If you just look at so much history in America in terms of democracy, what people paid for the right for us to vote. Stay engaged. We need you, okay? It's policy, and then it is also identity. It's both. So it's important that you follow the candidates, whoever they be and whoever, but you have to engage. So if your candidate does not win the nomination, we still need you to be engaged. So that's why you can't hinge your whole democracy or your whole right to vote on a personality or someone's policy. You got to hinge it on something just a little bit more higher than that. You have to do that for the country. It's for humanity's sake, remember. And humanity's sake does not speak about a one person who has the best policy. It doesn't talk about one person with their identity. It talks about humanity. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Mr. Teixeira, are you ready to?
Thank you, Max. We were here for Super Tuesday, but I'm more interested in this conversation right here, because at the end of the day, I think we need to know our history a little bit, and it's our fault for not sharing it. So I'm going to take a minute right now, and I'm going to tell you guys about some of the people sitting up here. And Saily, you keep saying that you're going to get fired. No, you're not going to get fired. You're the exact executive director of the party that a chairman of a local party wants, somebody that comes from the grassroots level that has that perspective. And
I'll give you a call.
You know what? Absolutely. But that's where she comes from. And Councilwoman Perkins-Auguste from the city of Elizabeth, she didn't appear as a councilwoman. When the party, I don't even know if it was the party because when running against an incumbent mayor, a 28-year mayor in the city of Elizabeth, a racist. I mean, those are my opinions right now. But a Democrat, but a racist, a Ronald Reagan Democrat. I'm sorry. There was all sorts of things going on back then. The president of the NAACP, Councilwoman, that's who she was at 29 years old. She was like you guys, not far removed from where you guys are right there. And Ray Lesniak, he didn't just become whatever he is now. We're not even sure what he is today. But Ray Lesniak, when he became, and I say that with the utmost love because Ray Lesniak, when he was my senator, when I was his chief of staff, he transcended leadership. But I'll tell you, in 1999, I led the charge with Democrats for Change to unseat Ray Lesniak, the monster leader of the party. But in the 1980s, he was fighting Tom Dunn in the streets of Elizabeth when he was banning Spanish in City Hall. And that's the thing. We all come from there, In 1999, when I was doing Democrats for Change against Ray Lesniak and Pat Perkins-Auguste, when I was working against them, I wasn't even a U.S. citizen, And today, I'm a party insider. You know, I'm a party insider. I don't want to even talk about Angela Garrison and what she did in Hillside School Board Council. You know, sometimes with the support of the party, sometimes against the party. And that's what, no matter what happens here tomorrow, no matter what happens on June 2nd in New Jersey, we need to remember we were all there. We're still there. I'm still there. I don't think the party bought me or corrupted me. I think I influenced the party. I think Ray Lesniak brought the party to a certain level, and he ended up becoming one of the most progressive senators in the state of New Jersey. In the meantime, in the 90s, he was Bill Clinton's best friend and raising all this money and all that stuff. But you know what? He still got rid of mandatory minimums for drug dealing, whatever it is, because people like me, when I got arrested for cocaine possession, you know, because I happen to be a little different skin tone, I really truly believe that I didn't go to prison. You know, I got PTI. And just because I got arrested in Union and not Elizabeth, New Jersey, where everywhere was a school zone, it would have been a whole different world. You know, so I mean, that's the reality of who the people are in this room, no matter whether it's Bernie Sanders or Mike Bloomberg. At the end of the day, we all, Ray Lesniak used to say this all the time when he was a senator, we don't live in a silo, you know. We're not all teachers or cops or activists. We all have to go home and live in the same neighborhoods and drive to the same streets. And so that's the thing, like, I want you guys to hear, like, before these guys start talking about why Bernie's better than with all due respect, Councilman, you know, Joe Biden or Mike Bloomberg or, you know, like, I want you guys to walk out of here remembering that at the end of the day, you guys are going to make us better. You guys are going to do that because otherwise I don't know why I'm doing this, because I like to think I made you better, Senator. I like to think that.
Thank you, Mr. Teixeira. Mr. Hamm, could you talk a little bit? A lot of people are ganging up on Bernie while you were out of the room. Mr. Steinberg said that Medicare for all is just not a tenable plan.
The idea that we should have national health care in this country is more than 100 years old. Theodore Roosevelt wanted to provide national health care. The idea for national health care actually first developed in Europe, in some of the European countries, and far-seeing leadership here in the United States wanted to do the same thing. But conservative forces pushed against it, just like they pushed against the New Deal. Everybody talks about the New Deal today. Franklin Roosevelt proposed Social Security. The Republicans of the time opposed Social Security. In fact, they tried to say that Franklin Roosevelt was crazy. You know, Social Security and unemployment insurance, and that banks, oh God, how could we possibly regulate banks? They opposed all of those things. Truman, after World War II, wanted to implement national health insurance in this country. Who stopped it? The Dixiecrats in the Democratic Party. Why? Because to have national health care, it meant that hospitals would receive federal funds. They would become federalized, and by becoming federalized, they could not operate according to the segregated laws of the states at that time. When Medicare was created, it was envisioned to be a program that would grow to ultimately encompass everybody. When they settled at 65, that was just a compromise. The original vision for Medicare was that it would eventually encompass the whole society. But the health insurance industry and other forces in the country have been pushing back against it. I'm glad to see that young people want Medicare for all. It is the future. The people who are saying these things can't exist, they represent the past. And they will hold on to the past as tenaciously as possible because they love the past. But you young people, you represent the future. You break through and bring us to a new day when nobody has to worry about paying for a doctor or a dentist, when nobody has to worry about how they're going to pay off $100,000 in student loans, when women don't have to worry about how am I going to pay for child care for my kids. Child care is almost like paying for tuition now. That's not the, we have a capitalist society that is out of control. I don't even want to talk, I'm glad you brought up democratic socialism, but I don't even want to talk about that at the moment. Let's just identify the fact that our capitalist society is not even keeping pace with the other capitalist societies. We're the only capitalist society that doesn't have national health care. Canada has it, England has it, Germany has it, France has it. Come on.
Mr. Hamm, I appreciate the remarks. And in that spirit, is there someone over here who has a question? Yes, sir. Please identify yourself.
Cohen, I'm a citizen of Elizabeth, active in a sense, certainly on the periphery. What we're not talking, they have everybody arguing. This is wonderful because I always talk about they, and people ask me who they are. We have a military-industrial complex. We have we're an empire now. We've been at war for 200 years. We've eradicated Indians. We've eradicated buffalo. We've had slavery and, the whole ball of wax. We all know this. We can't argue among ourselves. This is such a rich country. We have an aircraft carrier, the Gerald Ford, that they can't put into battle because it's too expensive. This is crazy. My president was John F. Kennedy. I would like to know, since we're talking about Super Tuesday, what does the military-industrial complex, which I think really runs this show, what do they want? And what do our security agencies want? And so on and so on and so on. Nothing we haven't heard before. And by the way, Michael Bloomberg, he didn't produce weaponry. He produced a fantastic piece of machinery, equipment. And it's useful. It's expensive. The Bloomberg that you see on CNBC and so on. At least his money is productive. We've got to think differently. All the young people, I'm older, but I've got children and grandchildren. I'm worried about Social Security, not for myself, for them. We've got to work together. My only point.
If I can, just quickly, Mr. Cohen, the military-industrial complex that you speak of was coined by Dwight Eisenhower.
Correct, Republican.
If you think about it, that's exactly what President Trump is trying to fight right now. He doesn't call it the military-industrial complex. He calls it a deep state. He calls it the swamp. He's got people in his own party. Not that, and even quite frankly, Hillary Clinton and Democrat Party, people that make money out of it, no matter what party they belong to, are part of that mess. He had opportunities. They encouraged him to go into Venezuela, and the name escapes me of who's in charge now and who's in charge, but he's in exile. I don't have to know the names, but I can tell you when he was asked to intervene militarily, he said no. When our ships were attacked in the Straits of Hormuz by the Iranians, he said no. When the oil fields were attacked in Saudi Arabia, he said no. When the drones also managed to do some additional attacking, he said no. He's just signed a treaty to get us out of Afghanistan after 19 years, much to the consternation of those people that are involved in the military-industrial complex. We became a great nation. As a great nation, we were surrounded by two great bodies of water, so we were basically isolationists traditionally, and going back to that traditional isolationism of which George Washington encouraged us to go back to, I think it's a step in the right direction by this president.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you. Listen, I have a question for Ms. Avelenda, who has spoken to the students representing two distinct avatars of political engagement. And to Mr. Teixeira's point, it's true that Ms. Avelenda was engaged in a grassroots activist way, much the same way that Larry Hamm has spent his career on the ground. And yes, she played an integral role in literally turning a Republican congressman out of office. But to Mr. Muller's point, Ms. Avelenda, and to the point that I see in the congresswoman that you supplanted, or that you put into office there, you helped put into office, who backs former Mayor Bloomberg, is the progressive message that Mr. Hamm is putting forward here tonight simply too much to put at risk a suburban district where Mr. Muller says that the Bloomberg message would be better at the top of the ticket? In other words, a Medicare for all message in a suburban district like the 11th, which you helped turn blue. Would you fear Bernie Sanders at the top of that ticket in a battleground district?
Way to put me on the spot. And basically ask the question, right? Look, in the end, it doesn't matter what I think, right? It really doesn't. We're going to arrive at a convention, and there are going to be choices to be made, and I think we don't even know what those choices are right now. I don't want to play what if, because there's a lot of baseball to be played. I know that there are candidates, and you're right, Mikey Sherrill, jumped on and endorsed Bloomberg. I didn't speak to her about it, so I don't know what her reasoning is. I know a lot has been written about it, and other candidates have jumped on their candidates, their presidential candidates. But I really, really think that this discussion is a little bit preliminary. We just don't have enough information for what it's going to look like. We don't know who's going to win the New Jersey primary, like New Jersey's own primary. So there's a lot of factors to consider in terms of what's going to be decided at a convention. So,
thank you.
No problem.
And you'll notice that the ordinarily voluble Paul Mulshine, to Mr. Cohen's point, has really just let Democrats fight among themselves. And I'm curious, Paul, do you just see a Roman Colosseum with a lot of casualties?
Well, I just think that, like I said, Bernie is really a Manchurian candidate who wants to destroy the Democratic Party. And the other thing that really is going to hurt in the general election is the global climate change alarmism like of AOC. Now, AOC had that Green New Deal that says no fossil fuels in 10 years. Now, if I buy a car tomorrow, that means I got to drive it to the junkyard in 10 years. It's insane. I saw Steyer up in New Hampshire when I was up there, and he was playing to the same audience. That was his obsession. And he attacked Trump for saying Trump is proud of the fact that the United States is energy independent and produces. Biden is much better on that. And Biden avoids a lot of the crazier stuff. And if Biden's the candidate, when you get to Medicare for all, Biden is absolutely right that if you're a Democrat, you should be supporting Obamacare, for just fully funding Obamacare. I mean, the big flaw in Obamacare was they left the people below about $15,000 a year in income, they left them on Medicaid. Well, if Obamacare was such a good idea, why did poor people not get Obamacare? He probably should have attacked that at the time, because then at least he would have had a comprehensive solution. And that's what Biden is actually proposing, which is, I think a more sensible way, and he probably is going to have a lot more success trying to sell that when he eventually becomes the candidate once Bernie kind of fails to get the majority.
Thank you, Mr. Mulshine. Assemblywoman Murphy, you occupy another battleground district, much like Executive Director Avelenda, where Andy Kim won, beat a Republican incumbent. Do you think that if Bernie Sanders occupies the top of the ticket in the 3rd Congressional District, that Andy Kim is a sure bet to lose?
I can honestly say I don't think so. I think Andy Kim will lose. And I'm going to tell you why, and no disrespect, but first I'm going to say this. I have met with a lot of college kids over the last 2 years. I've had roundtables with them. I've talked with a lot of between Rowan and Stockton and Rutgers and RCBC and TC&J, and I have to tell you something. Regardless of who you vote for, they're absolutely right. You have to get out and vote. That's the only way you're going to get your voices heard. But you do not have to be completely involved in politics to be an activist. What you need to do is find something you stand for. But I'm going to tell you this. Reason why I think if Bernie Sanders becomes president, and I want all of you to think about this very carefully, is the Medicare for all. I have seniors who call my office saying, I can't go to the doctors because I only get so many visits under Medicare. I can't afford my medicine because the medicine is so high and Medicare won't pay for it. Now imagine every single person in the United States having Medicare. Is that going to be better for you? Absolutely not. So what I'm saying to you is that do your homework, okay? It's easy for everyone to stand up here and tell you who to vote for, why they think it's the best person, why they're out there telling you what their candidate stands for. Do your homework. Understand what Medicare for All really means. Ask your grandparents what Medicare really means. Ask your neighbor and talk to people. Is the education that you're getting, is our expectations on you so high that the only alternative you have is to have free education? I sit on the budget committee. And when we do this budget, you learn so much, and I can honestly say with 100%, if I could sit here and vote for everybody to have free education, we would do that. But look how many other programs get cut because of that. Do your education. And for the panel, and I knew it, sorry, I'm getting on my soapbox here, but let me tell you something. Listen to the young people. Their voices are the most powerful thing in the world. And if we don't stop trying to resolve things that happened in the past today, tomorrow's going to be here, and we're not going to have a solution for tomorrow. And if we're sitting here advising our young people to get out there and to vote and to make a difference, then you know what? How are we doing any justice for them when we're not giving them things to work with? If we're setting expectations so high that, you have a person standing up here, and no disrespect to, Senator Sanders, but hogwash. This man stands up here and says he's going to give free college, he's going to give free Medicare, he's going to free this, he's going to give all free. That ain't going to work right now because we as a society perfectly has been set by every single person in here. Money plays a part in how we do business. $15 minimum dollar wage, the greatest thing ever. But look at the other side. I sat there and listened to my businesses that are under $1 million, who are run and operated by our middle class residents. They decrease their employees because of the $15 minimum wage. Healthcare, the biggest problem there is with healthcare. And we're sitting here saying that Medicare for All, a place that is definitely not going to be suitable 10 years from now, that's not the path. That's just going to create more people having problems in the emergency room. The emergency rooms now are overcrowded because people cannot afford health care, and they go through charity care. So what I'm saying to you, and this is the best part, and Senator, thank you for putting this together. This is the greatest thing because what this is doing, yes, we are arguing, and yes, everybody is. Gentlemen and ladies, listen to our young ones, listen to the adults. Because you know what, they do have some wisdom. They do have some ideas of what has happened that doesn't work.
Thank you, Assemblywoman.
Thank you.
And now, unfortunately, we're out of time, but I hope the discussions continue into the evening. And we're going to hear from now Senator Raymond Lesniak, the namesake of this fine institution. Yes, sir, you will, but unfortunately after Mr. Lesniak.
Can you hear me? Well, actually, Larry, we're going to have to terminate it. You guys can duke it out afterwards. But this has been a more civil, more informative dialogue about politics in America than all of the Democratic and Republican presidential debates combined. So give yourselves a big hand. And one of the reasons why is because he was so fair in moving the discussions along is our moderator, Max Pizarro, InsiderNJ. I have been inspired by the students. I've been inspired by the panelists, representatives of the candidates, Tony Teixeira, who said such nice, good things about me. Just remember that America was built by the people around this room. Just look around this room and you see America in your eyes, young and old, every single ethnic group, religious group, every single heritage. My dad came from Poland, his grandparents came from Poland. My dad had to quit school in the 8th grade to work on the docks. And they didn't have child labor law in those days. And he produced a senator for 40 years in the state of New Jersey. That's what's great about America. That's what you make great. God bless you and have a great night. And thanks for being here.
Okay, I did your role. You don't have to say anything else, all right?
All right. Governor McGreevy, thank you for coming. Again, everybody have a great night, and thanks for participating.